Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, the podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, and game masters. With your questers, Josh and Dan, I am Dan.
And I'm Josh.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things penumbral, as we are going to talk about the city underneath Skypoint, Vrontok. So if you have any questions for us, we just did an Email Palooza episode. Drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. Keep them coming, because we'll keep answering those. And pick Josh's brain. Maybe mine, once in a while. Not rare, not often, but...
We will be talking about Vrontok for the second time. You did not hear the first time, because I screwed something up and lost my half of the audio from the previous time that we recorded that, which was supposed to have been between the penultimate and the final chapter of Blades. I went to do my editing and realized that I just had the final episode of Blades. I didn't have Vrontok in there at all. So which is why
in the 80s when you had a cassette tape and you accidentally recorded over your thing, that's what Josh did.
That's the most likely answer. But that's why we're actually a week. We sort of went an extra week between releases because things got off schedule because I screwed up.
We had a technical glitch, people. And it was Josh's turn. I've had my fair share.
Yeah, out of 275 episodes, we actually have not had a lot of glitches that required us to completely re-record stuff. So I think overall we're doing pretty well.
In our first 50 we did, because I had a really lousy computer at that time, but in the last 100 we have not. I'll let you all do the math as to when those episodes happened. Anyway, so we're going to talk about Vrontok, because finally when you get into, as I've said before, Josh and I are playing taxi driver, tour guide from Barsave into Vivane province. And so we are kind of directing you to the sights and sounds and so forth. And we've seen Skypoint because it's 800 feet in the air. But when you finally get around Skypoint, to Skypoint, near Skypoint, you're obviously 9 times out of 10 going to be on the ground. And so you're going to come across the town, and I'm not going to call it a city, the town of Vrontok, underneath Skypoint, as is described in the essay, a desperate, lawless place where everyday life revolves around the selling and buying of slaves. So this is going to be a joyful little tour guide here we're going to play. Enclosed within its protective walls, it is a crowded warren of streets and buildings, kind of like, a rabbit burrow. Nothing goes straight. There's no north, south, east, west axis to the layout of the city. It's just as things were built, it's all ramshackle. Housing and land are sparse and at a premium. And people have finally started building upwards instead of outwards. And so you'll find 2- and 3-story buildings that are not well supported. And so it's iffy at best. Most buildings are in the northern portion, and so stay in the shadow of Skypoint for most of the year, hence the penumbral word at the beginning of this episode. So these are shabby shacks and hovels and so forth and so on. This is not your party's vacation destination. If you're going to go here, they probably need a reason to be here.
Yeah, Vrontok is like Bartertown in one sense, in that it kind of just grew up organically because a bunch of people needed a place to stay, to do business.
Yeah.
There's no planning involved. It's not like the halls of Thrall, which are all, somewhat orderly and planned and constructed.
Mm-hmm.
This is more Boston than Washington, D.C.
The city was not planned out in Boston.
The partial joke about Boston is that when the time came, all they did was pave over all of the cow paths to do the street layout, whereas Washington, D.C. was very, very clearly organized, or the way that Midtown Manhattan is organized. It's all very right angles and blocks and whatnot. That is not really the case in Boston.
Reminds me of a phrase that was used to describe the city of Santa Fe, New Mexico, by the infamous comedian Will Rogers. Santa Fe was designed by somebody who was drunk and riding backwards on a mule.
Vrontok is like Bartertown, but even darker, because while Bartertown is its own flavor of Wretched Hive, because of its proximity to Thrall, slavery and the slave trade is not something that is allowed there.
Mm-hmm.
because if it were, certainly in the Varolus/Nedin era, that would have been something that would have prompted Thrall to take action against Bartertown. And so Clystone wisely does not allow such things to happen, at least publicly.
Yeah.
Vrontok does not have that benefit, where it's in the shadow of Skypoint, which is Theran Fortress, and a big part of the Theran economy is reliant on slavery. There's all the awfulness that goes along with that.
Absolutely. So modern day, and we're going to go with 3rd edition for modern day. We'll get to the 4th edition update here in a minute or so. I like at the end. So the modern day, air quotes, 3rd edition consists of the town proper, the non-Theran population, to answer the question, well, why don't they just all go up to Skypoint and do the slave trade up there? Because they're not Therans. Only Therans are allowed up on Skypoint. And so this is the town proper and a military camp, which takes up a nice sizable portion of Vrontok. And that is how that houses the Imperial 8th Legion. So soldiers. This is more crowded than ever as the Theran demand for slaves grows. And so this small community, putting it mildly, this neighborhood, this town, just keeps getting more and more people in it. It's roughly composed, since Game Masters have to know, of about 40% human, 28% orc, 12% dwarf, so that's about 70% of your population. The other 40, that's about 80% of your population. The other 20% is 11% elf, 9% troll, less than 1 or 2 windlings or obsidian. I think it's just too tough, rough and tumble a place for windlings to hang out. And Obsidian, I think, would have maybe some objections, but I don't know. Of roughly 13,000 inhabitants, of which 8,000 are permanent residents. So about 5,000 people just transients, all in, all out, hours of the day and night, knock yourself out.
And those are both slaves and slave traders and other merchants.
Absolutely. So the gates may sometimes be shut due to horrendous overcrowding. Game Masters, do with that what you will, leading to a line of tents outside the gates, sometimes half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, or a kilometer long. So people will line up because they want to get in on the slave trade. There you are. So even though Vrontok is the hub of the slave trade, slave stealing is the worst crime on the books and is punishable by death. So they don't take lightly to that as well, because there are 2 punishments. Either you are, if you're convicted of a crime, you are all of a sudden made into a slave because that makes more money. Or if you're convicted of a crime, you're put to death if it's one of the 2 horrendous crimes, which is slave stealing or murder. So it's pretty cut and dried. Don't mess up in this place at all. So as we approach these gates, as we approach this town, and you see Skypoint above us, we are the tour guides. The security, again, Game Masters have to know this, the security of this joint is the outer wall is 16 feet high, 4 feet thick, with battlements and a walkway. There are fortified towers every so often that are 22 feet high because they have an elevated position. Outside of this wall are some deep ditches divided by rows of sharpened stakes. So the whole place just says kind of go away, don't come in. So you really need to be, you really have to have business there if you want to get in.
Yeah, it's fortified. Really, the original source of Vrontok was the Theran military outpost, the Legion outpost there down on the ground level, because the troops there needed to be in a place where it was easy for them to send out patrols and otherwise control the land from a military occupation standpoint.
Yeah.
And so it's a walled area, and then there are outer defenses as well to prevent or dissuade any kind of military attack on the Theran military post that's there.
Yeah. Well, this was...
And then the rest of the town sprung up, as always is the case when you have a military base, of all of the people and civilians and whatnot that provide services to the soldiers and to the military. Mm-hmm. Everything from suppliers and camp followers and things like that, but also because the slaves largely get shipped out of Sky Point.
Yeah. Through
the airship yards there. This is the place where slavers would go to deliver their slaves to sell off to the Therans.
Mm-hmm. Well, and the town and the fortified wall was part of the construction, because as they were building Sky Point, they were putting in all the pillars and the magical so forth, the magical patterns and all that to get the pillars to be very, very sturdy, both from an engineering standpoint and from a magical standpoint. They were still being raided by the orc scorchers around the area. And so they had to build the wall. But once you build the wall, that helps keep the scorchers out. Well, now you're kind of stuck inside. You make a community out of living inside this place. So they did so. And when they built that wall, they built 3 gates. There's the Outlaw Gate, the Vivane Gate, and the Empire Gate. And I'm just guessing, because there's no picture in the book at all, that each one of those kind of points in a certain direction. I think the Vivane Gate kind of points toward back to Vivane City. The Empire Gate would kind of point back toward Thera, and the Outlaw Gate, make that one up. I don't know.
I would not say that. I don't think that the Empire Gate points towards Thera, because if I'm recalling correctly,
and your memory's better than my prep,
Vivane is southwest of Sky Point.
That, yeah, sounds about right.
Which would also be the same direction that Great Thera is off to the southwest. So I would guess that the Empire Gate is probably the gate that is the external gate that accesses the military outpost where the Legion is.
That would make more sense.
And then the Outlaw Gate is probably the third gate that still accesses like the civilian portion of Vrontok.
Mm-hmm.
Just not the part that faces Vivane.
Fair.
There's not really much of a map of Vrontok.
Fair.
That I can recall anyway.
I couldn't find one, so we're making it up as we go along. And like I said, your memory's better than my prep.
It's possible that
ferret out what you need in a minute.
So
all of those gates. So like we said, Vrontok has 3 gates: the Outlaw Gate, Vivane Gate, Empire Gate. Now all of those are closed between sundown and sunrise, because again, this is involved in the slave trade, and that is money coming in and money going out. So they don't want anybody being kidnapped, stolen, or any other tomfoolery or illegality going on. So those gates are closed, sundown, sunrise, definitely patrolled, heavily guarded, and secured. They are either patrolled by the 8th Legion military or the mayor's men. Now, the mayor is a despicable garbage person, and the mayor's men are all brutes and bullies, and the mayor's not any better than that. The penalty of trespassing. So after sundown, before sunrise, the penalty of trespassing is execution or slavery. That's going to be a drinking game here in a minute or so, because we're going to mention that as a punishment at all times.
Yes, there is actually a map of Vrontok.
Oh, cool.
It is on the back cover of book 2 in the box set. It is a map of Sky Point and Vrontok. So...
oh, there it is.
Yeah, if we're going to talk about the layout, the military outpost portion of it is kind of like a crescent shape running from the northeastern pillar down around to the southwestern pillar.
Yes.
And the Empire Gate, as I thought, does access that portion of Vrontok.
Yeah, so it's like 5 on a clock face. That would be where the number 5 is the Empire.
Yeah, roughly speaking.
12 is up, straight up. Yeah, 5 is that one. 1 o'clock would be the Vivane Gate. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to say, and the Outlaw Gate is almost 180 degrees around the other side.
Yeah, it's almost a polar opposite of that one.
Yeah, so you've got like the Empire Gate is the southeast corner of that circle, like you said, around 5 o'clock. The Outlaw Gate is sort of like northwest, probably like 10, 11 o'clock, somewhere right around there. And the Vivane Gate is northeast, so what would be like around like 2 o'clock or thereabout. So there really isn't a gate access from the southwestern side of Vivane.
Yeah. Stupid me. I looked in the book for the map. Never mind. It's on the back.
Well, yeah, I was just scrolling through the PDF. I was thinking that it was possible that one of the handouts, one of the individual like paper handouts might have had it as well. So I was just kind of scrolling through.
No, like I said, your memory's better than my prep, because I just didn't find that one. Okay, there we are. So if you go to Vrontok, if you're there, sorry.
Actually, also to mention,
do it,
because I was looking at the map, to tie back into an earlier episode, the elemental elevators are all attached to pillars that are
barracks, the military.
In the military area, which makes sense. which like explains why there aren't elemental elevators on all of the pillars. They are only on the ones that are actually controlled by the Theran military area.
Nope.
Those are all internal fences or walls to, again, keep people out from them.
Yes. Which makes sense. If you're going to walk your slaves into this area, then you want the military escorting them up and down those pillars to make sure that they don't revolt, they don't leave, they don't break free. Yes, we know we're talking about slavery in the fact of a fantasy setting, and that's all we're going to talk about for slavery there. So if you're in Vrontok, if you go there for any specific purpose at all, you might want to follow the law just to make sure you get out, because again, there are two punishments. All punishments are either slavery or death. Slavery mostly, as I said, it earns money, so they want to make their money off of you. And death for the murder or slave stealing. Those are the only two crimes that are death. Otherwise, you will be enslaved. If you don't plan to be, if you don't want to be enslaved, either don't go to Vrontok or mind your P's and Q's. Theran citizens. Now remember, Vrontok is not Theran citizens. The Therans live in Skypoint. Theran citizens are not subject to Vrontok's laws or taxes.
Yeah.
The mayor, Tarask, does a lot of public execution sometimes just to kind of keep people in line. So it's not one of those, by the way, the penalty is death. It's a public death. And they do this frequently enough to remind people that this is what the punishment is. They will announce it. They'll make a big spectacle out of it, and people will die publicly. So just letting you know. But since you're there, what's the money like? Because this is slavery from all over. It's run by the Therans. And so all currencies are welcome, because eventually at the end of the day, somebody's going to square up with somebody else and trade all the currencies back and forth, from Thrall silver to Theran gold to, the outlying territories in their pebbles or stones or tulip bulbs or cocoa beans or whatever you want to call it. The slave markets usually use Theran coins. Why? Because the Therans run everything. There you are. Merchants and traders use any and all, as enough visitors make currency exchange easy and or quick, and they'll just settle up at the end of the day, so they kind of make it work. So nothing to worry about there. There are 3 local taxes. So if you were staying for a while, you have to know these things. There's a house tax, 25% on all buildings sold. So if you're going to do any business there as a merchant, if you're going to set up for a while, you have to pay 25% of the purchase price to the city government. There you are. There's a guest tax.
Well, so that's if you are actually buying property.
Yes.
The government, aka Trask, gets his cut of the sale price.
Yeah. Wonder how he stays around.
That's the property owner. That's the landlord tax.
Yes. And the guest tax is 50 silvers per month for every single or non-property owner. So if you are not married,
or you don't own property,
so you're just kind of loitering is essentially it. You're not actually producing anything.
You could, again, renting is a thing. Like, you could be living in a house that somebody else owns, and you would need to pay the guest tax even though you're living there.
Mm-hmm. Because you're not an owner, so you're not paying the house tax.
Because you don't own the properties, because you don't pay the house tax, but you might be paying the guest tax because you are living there in property that you do not own.
Yes. And just in case you think they're not going to get you coming or going, there is an exit tax. If you are there for longer than, I think, a month, then there is a 30 silvers tax to leave Vrontok. And if you don't have it, by the way, guess what the punishment is? Slavery.
Yeah.
So
they're going to get the value out of you one way or the other. And that's also something that drives the high level of poverty and such that exist in the civilian section of Vrontok. Yeah. People can't afford to leave. They can, hopefully, maybe dodge guest taxes if they're careful. But there's only really 3 ways out of the town.
Yeah.
And
if you can afford to get out.
Yeah.
Is one of them.
There's only 3 ways to get out. And so those are all going to be watched, and they're going to be trying to take their cut when you leave. It's not like it's easy to sneak over the wall
No.
to get out that way because you've got an 18-foot high wall that you then come down into a trench filled with sharpened stakes.
Yes.
It is not exactly...
Not exactly an easy task.
Yeah. And what was the guest tax again? Was that, 50 silver?
The guest tax is 50 silver
Per month.
So not quite 2 silver a day, but darn close.
Yeah.
Darn close. Well, and so last recording, which got erased, you were going through the mayor's rise to ascendancy. So how Mayor Tarask got his job and what kind of person he is.
Yeah, he's awful.
Yeah, another garbage person.
Yeah. He's called the mayor, but the reason he's called that is because basically he said, hey, I'm the mayor, and if you don't accept it, I'm going to send my thugs to beat you up.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it. And he has a heavy enough hand. He's wealthy enough to pay all of his thugs and henchmen to enforce his will.
Yeah.
If there was a chance of something getting out of control, if there were any attempts by the resistance to have an uprising or whatever, he will put it down because the last thing that he wants is for the Therans to get involved. Because if the Therans get involved, they're going to be enslaving everybody and or cutting off heads.
Yeah.
The thing that comes to mind is Monty Python's Life of Brian.
Yeah.
The way that the Romans are treating the situation there, that Brian and the other rebels are under, that the Romans are just like, hey, as long as things aren't causing actual problems for us,
We don't get involved.
yeah, we're just going to kind of...
Yes. Because it's kind of a give and take. The Therans know what Tarask is doing, and they don't care because what he's doing doesn't impede on what they're doing.
Right.
But the moment it does, they'll come in and, curb stomp some people.
Yeah.
And so it works out. It's mutually beneficial. He takes care of it for them.
The other thing that comes to mind is Django Unchained. If you've seen that,
Sure.
The Tarantino film, Samuel L. Jackson in that movie plays a slave, but he is a high-ranking slave, essentially because he disciplines... He is the king of Shit Mountain.
Yes.
He may be living in shit, but he's going to make sure that he's got less shit on him than you do.
Yes. He's on the top of the pile.
Yeah.
And he makes sure the rest of it runs downhill. And everybody else is downhill.
That's the kind of thing that happens when you've got this awful, brutal, dehumanizing
System.
Yeah. Authoritarian kind of system where there is a very clear and definite hierarchy, that being that the Therans are on top, and
Literally.
if you want to be successful, you'd rather be perhaps clinging to their bootlaces rather than being under their boot.
Mm-hmm.
But you're still down there sort of getting trod on.
Exactly. So the daily life, like I said, if you're going to Vrontok and you get in through the gates and you're there legitimately to do business, shame on you for being involved in slavery. But the daily life there, and places of note to point out, there is some strong ale. There are many illicit pursuits. There's lots of noise, lots of violence. It kind of doesn't stop. There are taverns and dance halls and gambling dens and brothels, etc. The residents there are predatory. They are swindlers and ne'er-do-wells. It's everyone for themselves, kind of look over your shoulder, and don't really trust anybody. The Theran language is primary, but there's a street slang that's evolved there as well. So Game Master's going to get to kind of have a little bit of fun with how the locals will talk.
Yeah. Essentially, you've got the slaves, which is the primary economic driver within Vrontok, the slave trade. And the slave market, looking at the map, takes up almost a third of the civilian area.
It's big business.
Yeah, that there's a lot of money that flows through, and the gambling halls and dance halls and brothels and all of that stuff are there to serve the slave traders and the wealthy, those who make their money off of the slave trade.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the slaves down at the bottom, you've got the slave traders and whatnot at the top. And then kind of in between that, you've got all of that service industry stuff that's going on who are probably just barely getting by.
Yeah.
And it would not take much, somebody has a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
If you owe somebody money, odds are you're going to end up getting sold into slavery.
Yeah.
Like I said earlier, they're going to get their value out of you one way or the other. You're either going to hand it over in silver, you're going to hand it over in flesh.
Yeah. Because I could also see where there might, one of these days, Tarask would instill a system of, hey, turn somebody in for breaking the law, and we'll reward you. Wow. The number of people who just reported illegalities just went way up because now
just turned in their
all
neighbors.
These arrests to make, and we have a whole bunch of new slaves. Look at that.
And because the government, such as it is basically Trask and his thugs.
Yeah.
If he decides, you know what, I want to make a little bit more money, I'm just going to increase this tax to make more money out of it. And, now a whole bunch of people now suddenly can't pay. And so I'm just going to sell them to the Therans, and I'm going to, again, get my money out of them one way or the other.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Who are you going to complain to?
Yes.
There is no justice.
It's a corrupt system. It's authoritarian corruption.
Yeah, it is absolutely graft and bribery and corruption.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing that results from the dehumanizing, evil practice of slavery.
Yes.
It might not be the race-based slavery that
countries have known on Earth. Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking specifically of the American South.
Fair.
In the 17 and 1800s.
1800s, yes.
So it's not really that way, but you're still looking at humans being bought and sold for labor, for the economic, not to get all Marx and Engels, but ultimately
humans and orcs and dwarves and trolls and whoever else they want to capture. Yeah.
Labor by its very nature, working is selling your body, selling your time.
Yeah.
And it's just, when you get to slavery, there's no compensation for it.
No.
There's no justice. And empires thrive on underpaid or unpaid labor.
Exploitative labor, yes.
Yeah, exploitative labor, whether that's slavery or wage slavery.
Yep.
As he glances meaningfully at the world around us currently.
General sweep of arms.
Yes, general waving in the direction of everything.
Yes.
It's really interesting kind of looking at this now in 2026.
Yeah.
As we're recording this and looking at the state of the world, especially over the last few years and the absolutely god-awful corruption and monopolization and consolidation and everything that's going on with the ownership class, with the top 1% that basically own everything, and the way that our system has developed and structured and whatnot. Looking at that in this context, then this material, looking at it today, compared to how it would have looked in 1995 or 1996, where the system still wasn't great, but that was before we had the internet crash, the dot-com bust, and then the housing collapse, and then
the legalized bribery.
Well, like looking at this in the context of the mid-90s, right? The Clinton era, the way that things kind of looked at that point in time, and then looking at it now with the past 25 years of economic bullshit that has been happening.
Yes.
It's really interesting, and it kind of makes me, from a kind of like philosophical standpoint, you look at this book, and we're going to probably explore this in a bit more depth as we get into Vivane City and various other things, but also the Theran Empire book and Shroud of Madness, the novel that's set in Vivane, and looking at how some of those things tried to provide some nuance to Therans as, they're not all bad. I don't agree with slavery, but it's the way that things are. And just having a very different feel of, not that OG FASA, not that first edition FASA and Lou and the writers and so forth were necessarily looking at it as apologia for slavery.
No.
Well, slavery is bad, but I'm reminded of Star Wars A New Hope, the first one, the original first Star Wars.
1977.
Yeah, where like early on, Luke is like, it's not like I like the Empire, I hate it, but what am I gonna do?
I'm a grain of sand in the galaxy.
And like that's the kind of situation here. It's like very clearly Vrontok is the dark underbelly that allows the glory of the Empire to function.
Yep.
It's a lot harder for me today now with 30 years of life experience behind me.
General sweep of arms. Yeah.
To like look at this and go, there are probably Therans who live in Vivane or in various other parts of the Empire who are like, I don't really like slavery, but what are you going to do? And getting increasingly to the point of, if you're not openly working against it, you're complicit.
Yes. Fair.
And whatever kind of, well, I don't personally own any slaves, or I'm good to my slaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you're still benefiting from a system that is exploiting and dehumanizing people.
Yes.
This is the kind of thing where the whole idea of we shouldn't have games be political. This is political. The existence of people and the systems under which they exist and live and work and survive is political.
We've mentioned it. Go ahead.
You cannot look at this, you know, I really personally like the Therans get more and more
evil.
Yeah.
There's just no other word for it.
Imperialism and colonialism and all of this other stuff, things exist in a context. And it is that context that makes it political. And you can't tell me that looking at Vrontok, this wretched hive of scum and villainy that exists in the shadow of this glorious imperial structure that thrives and is the confluence of the rivers of silver and gold that run through the empire and the exploited labor that allows it to function.
Oh, the metaphor is thick that this cast.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's sort of the metaphor there, but it's just like, I don't understand how somebody could look at the situation here and not reflect on our own systems and our own world and our own lives.
Yes.
How could you look at this and, oh, it's fantasy, it's fiction, it's nothing. No, it's a reflection of what actually happens with people.
Dozens of countries have had human slavery. Hello. So don't think any country's immune to that in their past. And a lot of them are a lot older than ours. So, yes, I was worried we were going to jump into a Shadowrun podcast real quick because we were talking about the corporatization of government. So I was worried about that for a quick second. I wasn't going to be able to keep up. Because I can see how these two are tied still.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing. Like with Shadowrun, the dystopia of Shadowrun, and it's another reflection of the systems.
Yeah. Oh, back in '93, I was like, this is neat, cool, different alternate universe to look into. And today I'm looking at it going, God, they were so right. We're halfway there.
It's not even necessarily that, like, science fiction.
Yes.
It's not really talking about the future. It's talking about the present.
Yes.
In a different context. The same with fantasy.
In a more acceptable, digestible form.
Yeah. Fantasy is in some ways kind of a conservative genre in a sense, is that there's a lot of stuff in classic traditional fantasy that deals a lot with monarchy, and Tolkien sort of believed in the right of kings, essentially. Like that's the whole story around Aragorn is he happened to be a good king, but he was still a king.
Yep.
And there were lots of kings before him that were awful people and were led astray and corrupted and led to the end of the First Age and the end of the Second Age and all of that stuff in Middle-earth. And I don't know.
No, I'm saying the metaphor for Skypoint and Vrontok is great because the peak of civilization's up here on Skypoint. It's glittering, it's gleaming, it's polished, it's great, it's cool. The underbelly, literally and figuratively, that makes it all work is the slave trade at the bottom of the pile. Literally in its own shadow.
Yeah, in the shadow, this pile of garbage where all the slave trade and all of that sort of darkness happens,
Yeah.
flanked and overlooked by a military force that basically is saying, if you get out of line, we will come and stomp on you.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. So I find it throughout all the books, because this one came later in the production line, obviously, that's why we're getting to it later in the podcast line, is that
it's actually not.
It's in the middle. I know.
Well, this product number was 6108. Yeah. This came actually out, I think, before the Thrall Source book.
Yes. So but I know it came later in the line, so it wasn't like in the first year of release. In the first year of release, we had these hints, these glancing blows, these offhand comments about orcs were the most enslaved people and slavery did exist here, but Thrall got rid of it a long time ago, but Thera still practices it, so forth and so on. This set right here is taking the cover off, peeling the paint off, taking, a mirror to it or a very microscopic lens to, this is the trade of which all those other things we're referencing. And so this one makes you confront it. If you don't want to confront it, don't go to Vrontok.
Yeah.
If you're going to confront it, don't go to Vrontok thinking you can change it.
Yeah.
Because that's a whole different thing. So I think that they mentioned it offhand enough that this really was able to, we've told you about it. We've broached the subject. Now here's the deep dive.
You know how to change it. You crash an airship into it and make the whole thing.
I was going to say, here's our 4th edition update.
Yeah.
But if you're going to Vrontok at all, the daily life, the places of note, there's the slave market, and then the Slave Way Road has all sorts of businesses to separate your coin from you. And there's the Outlaw Town, which has the hooch shops and the gambling and the brothels and the marketplace and so forth and so on. So Vrontok residents regard Thera as fleas would regard the dog that they reside on. And Therans see Vrontokians as useful tools in the Empire, slaves or soon to be slaves, and none of them will ever have any rights. So that's kind of how this system works. So to Josh's point, the only way you handle that from 3rd edition to 4th edition is you bring down Vrontok, and this is the 4th edition update. So my question to you that I posed last time and got erased is, what happened to Vrontok or the slave trade at this location since all of Skypoint came crashing down on top of it? Would this be rebuilt somewhere else? Close by? Would they just kind of build up out of the rubble? Or is this now like a desolate place for...
So my thoughts on it, and this is
not
just sort of headcanon, at this point. This is the way that I sort of have it pictured in my mind, but until any details actually show up in a book, it could potentially change. There is too much rubble and destruction and whatnot.
Platform.
When the platform collapsed and came down on top of Vrontok. A lot of people died, particularly down, in the slave markets and Outlaw Town and whatnot, because obviously there was a big ground battle in addition to the airship battle. And so all of the gates would have been closed. People would not have been able to
flee,
escape.
Yep.
And so a whole bunch of innocent people, slaves and Barsavians, non-Therans, because the Legion would not have been in there. They would have been out on the battlefield. Died in the course of that.
Yeah.
I imagine that once things had kind of settled out, there is probably a small settlement of some sort that has sprung up to support a community of folks that is still, because it sort of present day, that it's something that only happened within the last few years. It's probably still a big pile of stone and rubble and ruins, and there are probably people that go and try and see if they can recover anything of value from the ruins. But it's probably still mostly a big wrecked pile of garbage.
Fair.
Since the Therans had been driven away, not just from Skypoint, but from Vivane itself, they don't have a presence within the area to bring the manpower in to clean it up and or rebuild it. I think that there probably is that the slave trade that used to go through Vrontok has probably moved to another location, probably somewhere deeper in Vivane province, closer to Rugaria, like in the areas that Thera still controls.
Yeah.
It's possible that there is some of that happens around Vivane City proper, just because of like sort of what I have in mind in terms of who's in control of that city, which we'll talk about another time.
Yeah.
But like that's the situation that Vrontok and Skypoint are just a big ruin that some folks are picking over to try and get stuff. There may have been small sections of it that have been opened up or cleared away, but for the most part, it's still just a big pile of rubble that some vultures are picking over.
Yeah, fair enough. Thought I would ask. Because obviously we're here for 4th edition, but this is a setting that has drastically changed in the last 2 editions. So 1st edition is the box that we're talking about, and 4th edition is, oh, look, it's a pile of rubble now. So had to get that in there. Any further thoughts on Vrontok itself or what became of Vrontok and its trade in the aftermath? I think you just covered that. So
yeah,
anything I missed other than the freaking map at the back of the book?
Yeah, no, I think we're good.
Fair enough. So, folks, if you have any questions for us, please drop us a line at edsgpodcast@gmail.com. We will pick Josh's brain some more because last episode was an email palooza, so we'll get to the next one when we have enough emails to get to. So, until next time, go crash the house in on your slave trade. That's a bad one. Sorry about that. Yeah, no. See you, folks.
Good night, everybody.